Welcome to the Castro Valley Compass, navigating your week through Castro Valley. Brought to you by the Castro Valley School of Music. We bring music to life. For information about private and group music lessons, call 510-397-0721 or visit us at cvsom.com. And now, here's your host of the Castro Valley Compass, Shane Sharkey.
It's springtime, time to get outside and enjoy that beautiful Castro Valley weather. But it's also mosquito time. We'll review how the first case of West Nile virus was recently found here in Castro Valley for the season, and how you can help control the mosquito population. And have you seen that building next to the 580 eastbound on-ramp on Redwood Road that's been under construction for years? Well, it's finally open, and we'll talk about some of the businesses that will likely be moving into that area. And a comedy club in Castro Valley? Yes. I'll give you the information you need to support local comedians and enjoy the Castro Valley comedy scene. All that coming up in our news roundup. And in our community calendar this week, we'll have a couple of events at the Castro Valley Library, including a Wicked sing-along, as well as some iPhone photography classes. And our spotlight interview this week will include portions of a conversation I had with local Castro Valley resident and mystery author Dan Grylles. If you've ever wanted to learn what it's like to be a mystery author, you'll want to stick around for this conversation. All that and more coming up on this week's Castro Valley Compass. Stay with us.
Looking to unlock your child's creativity? Or maybe you're an adult wanting to rekindle a love for music? At Castro Valley School of Music, we've got you covered. Studies show that learning an instrument boosts brain power, improves memory, and strengthens problem-solving skills. But the real magic happens when you play together. At Castro Valley School of Music, we offer lessons for all ages and skill levels, whether it's guitar, piano, violin, or something a little different. Our talented instructors will help you grow and have fun while doing it. And our group classes and ensembles? They teach teamwork, build friendships, and give students the joy of playing alongside others. It's where music becomes more than just notes. It becomes connection. Are you ready to start your musical journey? Call Castro Valley School of Music today at 510-397-0721 or visit us at cvsom.com. That number again is 510-397-0721, or you can visit us at cvsom.com. Let's make music together.
Now back to more of the Castro Valley Compass. Brought to you by the Castro Valley School of Music.
Hi, welcome to this week's Castro Valley Compass. I'm your host, Shane Sharkey, and we're going to get into it with our news roundup. And where I go for my local news here is the Castro Valley Forum, as well as the Castro Valley News Facebook page. Both are great resources for local news and events. And anyhow, let's jump into it. One of the first, actually the state's first report of West Nile virus this season has come about right here in Castro Valley. This is an article for the front page of the Castro Valley Forum by Michael Singer. We'll definitely have you check it out if you want some more details, but I'll go over a couple of the main points here. A dead bird tested positive for West Nile virus last week near the Castro Valley Community Center on Lake Chabot Road. It's the state's first report of the virus this year, prompting officials to increase mosquito monitoring in the area and ask residents to take preventative measures. We'll get into some of those measures here shortly. Let's see here. One of the first signs of West Nile virus is spreading in the area is the presence of dead birds, and they're asking people if you find any dead birds that you call what they call the Dead Bird Hotline. That number is 877-968-2473. Again, the Dead Bird Hotline is 877-968-2473. So if you find any dead birds on your property or out in public, please call the Dead Bird Hotline so they can monitor whether or not the bird died of West Nile virus. Now, there's no cure for the West Nile virus. It's transmitted to people and animals only through the bite of an infected mosquito and not by coming into contact with the dead animal. So just something to keep in mind. Those that are most at risk of serious complications of West Nile are adults over 50 and people who have compromised immune systems. Anyone who develops symptoms should seek medical care immediately. So it can be a serious issue, especially if you are over 50 and you've got a compromised immune system. But one of the best ways to prevent this is to try to limit the growth of the mosquito population. And here are a couple ideas that you can hopefully implement in your house to help us do that. Let's see. The best way to reduce the risk of West Nile virus is to prevent mosquitoes from developing in the first place. Residents can help by draining, treating, or covering any containers that hold water, or by contacting the district if there's standing water in their neighborhood. You can also protect yourself from mosquito bites by wearing long pants and long-sleeve shirts and applying insect repellent. I know it might seem like a no-brainer, but that's something that we should be thinking about, especially as it gets warmer. We got to compromise between our comfort of being too warm with our long sleeves or long pants. But again, if you see a dead bird, officials ask that you call the California Dead Bird Hotline. Again, that number is 877-968-2473. And if you want more information, you can visit the district services website at www.mosquitoes.org, or you can call them directly at 510-783-7744. But definitely encourage you to check out this week's Castro Valley Forum because it has this full article about the mosquitoes, and it's worth a read. Let's see. The second item in our news roundup today involves the building over here on the eastbound on-ramp, right next to the on-ramp on Redwood Road. The building has been under construction for several years now, and they have some new tenants that are potentially moving in there. According to realtor Mike Tanzillo, who's been my realtor for quite some time now, great guy. We'll have him on the show at some point as an interview, hopefully. But plans have taken since 2016 to get this building approved and built. It's at 21634 Redwood Road, right next to the 580 or 580 on-ramp right there. According to Mike Tanzillo, the building has 11 conventional office units and 8 that could be used for more creative commercial purposes. Some units have freight or passenger elevators. And the initial tenants would likely be professionals like psychologists and dentists. Anyone interested in renting can call Mike at MTC Commercial Real Estate at 510-889-9157. That's 510-889-9157. And Mike's just a great resource for any kind of local real estate here, commercial real estate in Castro Valley. And there's not a ton of stuff available, but Mike has been doing this for decades, and he knows pretty much every player in town. So anyhow, it's good to see that building's finally opened up, and hopefully we get some cool new businesses in there. All right, and our final news roundup item this week has to do with the comedy club that's coming back here in Castro Valley. And I don't know if you'd want to call it an actual comedy club, but it's a club that is gathering at Don Jose's restaurant to bring us some live comedy. After a highly anticipated wait, the Comedy Den is making its triumphant return to Castro Valley, bringing back the best in stand-up comedy and unforgettable nights of laughter. The beloved comedy venue is set to reopen its doors at Don Jose's Mexican, or it actually already did open its doors at Don Jose's Mexican restaurant last week. The Comedy Den has long been a cornerstone of Castro Valley's entertainment scene, hosting both up-and-coming comedians and nationally recognized headliners. Its return marks a revitalization of the local comedy scene, offering a space for humor, creativity, and community connection. Let's see. Here's a quote now. After the challenges of the past few years, we know people need laughter more than ever. We're thrilled to bring back the energy and excitement that made the Comedy Den a favorite for comedy lovers. This is Priya Gardine, the founder of the Comedy Den. So if you'd like some more information about the shows there, you can go visit them at thecomedydencv.com. That's www.thecomedydencv.com. Or you can follow them on social media at The Comedy Den CV. So if you're inclined to want to get out and check out some local comedy, that's the place to do it. That's going to do it for our news roundup this week, but when we come back, we'll go through our community calendar and give you some information about some cool events that are coming up that you might want to take part in. Stick around. We'll be right back.
Looking to unlock your child's creativity? Or maybe you're an adult wanting to rekindle a love for music. At Castro Valley School of Music, we've got you covered. Studies show that learning an instrument boosts brain power, improves memory, and strengthens problem-solving skills. But the real magic happens when you play together. At Castro Valley School of Music, we offer lessons for all ages and skill levels, whether it's guitar, piano, violin, or something a little different. Our talented instructors will help you grow and have fun while doing it. And our group classes and ensembles, they teach teamwork, build friendships, and give students the joy of playing alongside others. It's where music becomes more than just notes. It becomes connection. Are you ready to start your musical journey? Call Castro Valley School of Music today at 510-397-0721 or visit us at cvsom.com. That number again is 510-397-0721, or you can visit us at cvsom.com. Let's make music together.
Now back to more of the Castro Valley Compass. Brought to you by the Castro Valley School of Music.
Hey, welcome back to the Castro Valley Compass. I'm your host, Shane Sharkey, and it's time for our community calendar. Okay, coming up this weekend on March 29th at 2 p.m. at the Castro Valley Library, there'll be a Wicked sing-along. If you like that movie and you love to sing, you will be in a great space to sing along with others at the library. Again, that starts at 2 p.m. March 29th, which I believe is Saturday. Yep, that's Saturday. So if you haven't seen that movie, it started off as a play and it now became a very, very popular movie. And I myself have not seen it, but I know a lot of people who love it. And especially if you like musicals and you like to sing, I would encourage you to check out the Castro Valley Library this Saturday, March 29th from 2 to 4:45 p.m. Also coming up at the Castro Valley Library, there's going to be some classes in April that have to do with iPhone photography. It's starting on April 5th. Learn how to capture and share stunning photos with your iPhone or iPad. This is a hands-on class that will show you how to compose a shot, edit with the Photos app, and share your snaps. With time for a Q&A, the iPhone photo management class is also on Saturday, April 5th. I think that's what I just said. But anyway, Apple has given the Photos app its biggest redesign ever with the release of iOS 18. They'll cover all aspects of organizing your photo library with the redesigned Photos app. Registration is required, so you want to go ahead and register before you come out, and that's at aclibrary.org. Again, aclibrary.org for those iPhone photography classes. I could certainly use some of those. Let's see. Also coming up this Saturday on the 29th, we have an event recognizing our Vietnam War veterans. I'll give you a little info about that here. Please join Castro Valley Veterans of Foreign War in recognizing our Vietnam War veterans at Castro Valley Veterans Memorial this Saturday, March 29th at 10 a.m. Featured speaker will be Sergeant Bill Green, Army veteran with 2 Bronze Stars and 2 Purple Hearts. If you haven't been to our Vietnam or the Veterans Memorial, it's over in the community park there off of Lake Chabot. Definitely would encourage you to check that out. It's a pretty moving location with some great statues and really a lot of information about the great work that our veterans have done over the years. And it's a good time to get together and show your appreciation to them. I've been to a couple of events out there and met some pretty incredible people, including some people who did the same job my dad did in Vietnam, which was flying the rescue and to rescue the wounded and dead soldiers. So it's difficult to hear some of those stories, but it's a very powerful experience. Would definitely recommend you go out there and show your support this Saturday, March 29th at 10 a.m. Again, it's at the Veterans Memorial, the Castro Valley Veterans Memorial, and that is right behind the community center there on Lake Chabot Road. Okay, and coming up next Monday, March 31st, we've got a Start Smart Teen Driver Program. I'll give you a little bit of info about that. The California Highway Patrol and the Castro Valley Library presents Start Smart Teen Driver Program. The CHP officers will discuss traffic collision avoidance techniques, collision-causing factors, driver and parent responsibilities, and seatbelt usage. Additional testimonies will be provided by officers who have investigated fatal collisions involving teens and by family members who have lost loved ones in traffic collisions. The Start Smart program is a driver safety education class which targets new and future licensed teen drivers between the ages of 15 and 19 and their parents or guardians. A parent or guardian is required to attend the class with their teen. So to register, call the library information desk at 510-667-7900, or you can register online at aclibrary.org. Again, the phone number there to register is 510-667-7900, or you can register online at aclibrary.org. Okay, and our final event coming up on the community calendar is the Rotary Club is hosting Mike Crosby with End Polio Now. Mike Crosby with End Polio Now will speak to the Rotary Club of Castro Valley on how we can engage with the Polio Plus Society. A buffet lunch and the program take place at Redwood Canyon Golf Course, which is at 17007 Redwood Road in Castro Valley. And that's coming up at noon next Tuesday, April 1st. So from noon to 1:30, you can go check out this event, and reservations should be made online by 9 a.m. this Sunday, March 30th. So if you're thinking about checking that out, you want to go online and register no later than this Sunday, March 30th at CastroValleyRotary.org. That's CastroValleyRotary.org. And that's going to do it for our community calendar this week. Coming up next, we have some portions of an interview I did with a local mystery author named Dan Grylles. Fascinating guy with a really intriguing occupation, and he tells us all about what it's like to be a mystery author here in Castro Valley. So he's also got some tips for young people if they'd like to get started on writing. So if you are interested in that sort of thing, please stick around. We'll be back with Dan Grylles in our Spotlight interview coming up next.
Looking to unlock your child's creativity? Or maybe you're an adult wanting to rekindle a love for music? At Castro Valley School of Music, we've got you covered. Studies show that learning an instrument boosts brain power, improves memory, and strengthens problem-solving skills. But the real magic happens when you play together. At Castro Valley School of Music, we offer lessons for all ages and skill levels. Whether it's guitar, piano, violin, or something a little different, our talented instructors will help you grow and have fun while doing it. And our group classes and ensembles? They teach teamwork, build friendships, and give students the joy of playing alongside others. It's where music becomes more than just notes. It becomes connection. Are you ready to start your musical journey? Call Castro Valley School of Music today at 510-397-0721 or visit us at cvsom.com. That number again is 510-397-0721 or you can visit us at cvsom.com. Let's make music together.
Now back to more of the Castro Valley Compass, brought to you by the Castro Valley School of Music.
Hey, welcome back to the Castro Valley Compass. I'm your host, Shane Sharkey, and it's time for our Spotlight interview. This week, we had a conversation with a local mystery author named Dan Grylles. Dan's lived in Castro Valley for over 20 years, and he's got several books out, and he talks to us about what it's like coming up with ideas for his books, how he goes through the writing process and the editing process. Also, he gives us some tips on how to get involved in writing if you're a young and up-and-coming writer. So here we go with our interview with Dan Grylles. Enjoy. Dan, Thank you for coming in the studio.
Hey, I'm really excited about coming here. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. It's cool. I mean, the focus of the podcast and especially these spotlight interviews is to get to know local Castro Valley personalities and just get to learn more about you and especially about something as interesting as you being an author.
Yeah.
So I'd love to get into all that. Maybe you can tell me just for starters a little about you and your path towards writing.
Writing dumb.
Yeah,
as it
writing
were.
dumb. There you go.
Yeah, exactly. Well, let's see, how far back do I go? I enjoyed writing when I was a kid. I actually, I remember reading back in 5th and 6th grade, and if I go to my mother's house now, you can still find them. There's a dozen Hardy Boy books that are sitting on a shelf. When we first came to California, I was young, back in the 70s, and I grew up in Hayward for the most part in that regards. Went to Mount Eden High School. And read through the books voraciously, loved the Hardy Boys. My sister got Nancy Drew, that kind of stuff. And it's kind of what every kid grows up on or used to. And then they had the Hardy Boy TV series with, who was it, Sean Cassidy or whatnot. And but I went through those. I would read more stuff. That was 5th and 6th grade. Junior high, started picking up other things. There was a series called Encyclopedia Brown that I remember. It was like a junior detective type of stuff. Maybe one of these days I'll write something similar to it. Right. No relationship to me or anything like that. But he was a kid who would solve mysteries for his friends that were out there on the streets or in his neighborhood. I remember one story where they were trying to figure out whether or not the guy had driven the car recently, and then a little baby was crawling on the hood, and he says, "No, it couldn't have been him because the hood would be too warm for the baby to go on." So, well, these little things that he would insert in the stories. As I got older, into junior high and high school, I started reading Agatha Christie. And several of her novels, Mysterious Affair at Styles, Curtain. One of the ones that I always remember that jumped out, which was inspiration for the first book that I wrote, which was like a locked door mystery, was And Then There Were None. And that she had written that back, I believe, if not the late 40s, then the early 50s. And it's a series of 10 people are invited to an island, I think off the coast of England, and it's isolated, and then one by one they all start dying or being killed off. And they don't know who the murderer is, and they're trying to figure out, is it one of them? And then it boils down to, and I don't want to give a spoiler alert for anybody who hasn't read the story yet, but I remember it's like the last two, and then they go, and then that's the end of the story. And you don't know who the murderer is until like the last chapter, when the scene turns to like a police sergeant or some detective, and he receives a mysterious letter in the mail, and it's the murderer, and he explains, I shouldn't say he or she, explains the process, what they did, why they did it, why they killed off themselves as well. They were one of the people, and you don't know how. You're just like going, how did this happen? And that was an inspiration for my first book that I had, not the first book I had published, but the first book I actually wrote was Mystery of Le Canoe. Or I'm pronouncing it wrong. I don't have the correct French. Le Canoe, I think is how it's properly pronounced, which means Mystery of the Unknown. And the whole concept of the locked room mystery was one that I really, really enjoyed. Edgar Allan Poe became famous for this. One of his first stories, everybody knows him for, Quoth the Raven, Nevermore, et cetera, et cetera. So he wrote a lot of scary type of stories, Pit and the Pendulum. I'm trying to think what others off the top of my head. The Telltale Heart, all these scary stories. But one of the ones that he wrote was called The Murder on Rue Morgue, which is Rue is, I believe, is French for street. And it's a story about two women who are murdered in a locked room. So, and he wrote this back in, 1840s, 1850s, during the time of Abraham Lincoln. So he was sort of like the pioneer of the murder mystery locked room 100 years before Agatha Christie came out. But I only read that story maybe about 5 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, but I heard about it. So, and then I got a whole book on locked room mysteries type of stuff. And that was an inspiration for me to write that. It's hard to write that. How can you write something new about a murder that occurs in a room that it's locked from the inside and no one should be able to get in or out of it. So
I'd never heard that term before, locked room mystery, or is it locked room murder? Is that
locked room murder, locked room mystery? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's the mystery is not the murder itself per se, but it's how could the murderer have gotten away with it if the doors are all completely locked? So yeah, it's very and I think part of it is not just the story itself, but a lot of readers like to read that and say, how did he do it, or how did she do it?
Right.
And that is kind of the basis of which I started my first writing that I did. That was I started that I think about 5 years ago was when I started writing Mystery of Le Canoe.
Is that a similar concept, being that it's on a ship? Is that similar to a locked room? That
it can be. A lot of how shall I put it? A lot of these, it's a combination of murder plus scariness behind it. You've seen a lot of movies that have come out over the last couple of decades, which occur in a place, in a desolate place where people, a locked room like this is on a boat where no one can get off, where everyone's trapped. Similar stories are like sci-fi movies where they're trapped in a spaceship like an Alien, or on the Antarctica, like in the movie The Thing by John Carpenter with Kurt Russell. Excellent movies, because it's like these people are trapped. How are they going to get out of here? And who is the murderer? Who's going to survive? And those kind of things, I think, not only add a little bit of, okay, there's a murder behind it, but just the suspense that gets built as how are these people going to get away from this, if at all. You're rooting for whoever survives.
Right.
And that is kind of, I threw that into the story too as well.
It reminds me a little bit of The Shining.
Okay,
where you're sort of isolated in a way where, maybe not on an island or in a locked room, but in a sort of weather-related, blizzard locked in.
It can be. One of my favorite authors, and I think I've mentioned this probably in my Facebook page, is a guy who most people would probably have never heard of. His name is Taylor Adams. He's written about 4 or 5, maybe 6 books. And his genre is always murder mystery. And it kind of starts with the thought that someone is running for their life and they can't get out of their situation. They're trapped. And one of the first books that I read of his was amazing. It was turned into, I believe it was if it's not on Netflix, I think it's on Hulu. It's called No Exit. And it's an incredible story about a young girl who, a college-age girl, who is in a drug rehab program. And she can't leave the drug rehab program, so she escapes out of the drug rehab program to get in her car to drive through a blizzard to get to the West Coast because her mother's dying of cancer. So she has to go. So that you feel the tension on the person has to get somewhere, but she gets stopped in, I forget exactly where, in Denver or somewhere in Colorado, in a winter blizzard. She's trapped at one of those rest areas with, I believe, 4 or 5 other people. And she finds, and try not to give too much spoilers away here, but within the first 35 pages, and this is fast, this is what's suspenseful, she finds a young girl kidnapped in the back of one of the vans of the cars of one of the persons who are in the rest area. And she's trying, and the girl is like, get me out of here, please. It's like 10-year-old little girl. And that's where the suspense is. And you don't know who that person is or if they have a gun or what. And she's got to rescue her. So just the tension starts from the very beginning.
Wow.
Yeah.
Intense.
Yes.
So when did you write your first book?
I started writing this book in 2019. It took me about 1.5 years to write. And it was actually not the first book I had published. I've actually published 2 other books before I got this one out, and that's because it was going through an editing process. This is actually the third book that I actually wrote, but published it second. We can talk about that later if we have a chance.
Okay.
But I actually brought this copy for you.
Oh, cool.
So you'll have that. But this, again, is a locked room mystery. It took about 1.5 years. When I first wrote it, I was like, okay, I had written it, and I kind of laugh about it. It was 132,000 words. Now, most people will tell you don't write a novel over 100,000 words unless you're Michael Crichton or you're I'm trying to who's the guy who wrote The Shining? I'm trying to think.
Oh gosh. Stephen King?
Stephen King, yes. Unless you're Stephen King or something
Right.
like that, where you're a well-known artist, go ahead and write 150, 170,000 words. It's
Right.
Jurassic Park, go ahead and write 170,000 words or something like that, because you're gonna grab the reader, you're gonna grab the reader and you're gonna take him through the book, and he's not gonna want to put it down. But for as a first-time author, I tried to pitch this to a couple of publishing houses, and they kind of went, it's a little too long. And by a little, they meant it's like 25% too long.
Right.
So I went back and I actually went through it. I think I edited 8 times until I could slash out a lot of the words. And you realize a lot of the redundancy that you had written. And I thought it was a great writer. Yeah, I could write and I could write and I could keep writing. The problem is I wrote too much. And one of the tricks of writing well is to, especially a thriller or a murder mystery, is to grab the reader's attention as quickly as possible, because if you don't get them within the first 30 or 50 pages, then they're just going to say, well, this is not interesting, and I'm just going to move on.
Right.
So the trick was to clean out a lot of the material. I got it down, I think, to 108,000 words. So I had to wipe out almost 20 to 25% of my book.
Wow.
And I realized a lot of the redundancy that I had from it. I actually had this is kind of a side note here. I had actually just gotten my master's at Cal State Hayward. I went and got an MBA up there just a few years before this. I'd completed like 2 years before that. I thought, oh, I'm such a great writer, blah, blah, blah. And then I went through and I read the book, and I've read it again, and I go, man, this isn't really all as good as I thought it was originally. And I think the first time you're trying to put pen to paper or keyboard, that you think your story is really good until someone else reads it. And then it's like, okay, I think you need to make all these changes that come along. You need to grab my attention. And you have to not only just grab your attention, but you have to carry it all the way to the end. And you have to make sure that the reader is not only just happy, but excited about the ending, that they're not disappointed. One of the things, and maybe you've experienced this too, if you're reading a murder mystery, is the most exciting thing about the book is the ending.
Right.
What the denouement or denouement is, if it kind of goes over the cliff, it's kind of like, oh, that's kind of a boring, that's kind of a cheat, that's kind of a cop-out in the way that this happened, the way the murderer did what he did, or why he or she did this. It's like, well, okay. The aliens came down and killed them and went off into outer space. That's kind of a cop-out.
Right.
I don't think I've ever read a story like that. But if something were like that, and I have read some books like that, it's like, that is really a disappointment. And because the most important thing in writing a book that a user's thinking of is not their money, it's their time. I spent 4 to 8 to 15 hours, depending upon whether they're a quick reader or slow reader, such as myself. I think I'm a slow reader because I take a lot of time to picture everything. But when you get to that, you go, man, I wasted 12 hours reading this. This wasn't really all that interesting.
How do you, when it comes to this crazy digital world of all the distractions, I mean, how do you even, first of all, set aside the time to write? Is that something that you do every day just as a matter of habit?
Yeah, that's a good question, because not wanting to go into details, I actually have a full-time job too as well, but I write on the side. I remember, who was it? I'm trying to remember the author. He wrote military spy thrillers, and I'm blanking on his name right at the moment, and I'll remember it right after this interview. You guarantee it. Yep. But he would say that he would write as much as he could and research. And he's from the 1980s, kind of like he would write between, he said he wrote between like 10 p.m. and 2 in the morning. That was the only time that he had to write it. I swear the guy must have only gotten like 4 or 5 hours of sleep or something like that. Most of the time for me is usually between 9 and midnight. And then I get up at between 6 and 7 in the morning, and I try to get some exercise, kind of get my body going, try to get myself mentally stimulated. And I always have my iPhone with me. So I'm always opening up my notes and saying, here's a great note to put down for this book or this story and whatnot. Because I could be working, like even right now, I'm out working on like 4 or 5 different stories at the same time. Whether any of those will see the light of day, whether they'll be finished or not, I don't know. But yeah, that is it. And like you said about the digital world itself, whether it be YouTube or the news, or hundreds of other things that you could be distracted by. I always try to limit myself in that regards to shut it off if necessary. Sometimes I'll just pack up my computer and go off somewhere where I have no internet connection. And it forces me to sit down and think and write out and just literally just type it in. If I have like a gap where it's like, okay, I don't know what word I want to use here, I don't have my digital thesaurus connection,
Right.
or I don't have the details behind how this combustion engine or whatever it is, or how an airplane flies properly, I'll put in, need to research here in brackets. And then when I
Right.
get back home, I'll pull up the information. But that's kind of how, just sometimes disconnecting myself from the digital world is required, because otherwise the book may never get written otherwise.
Right. So when it comes to research, I mean, it seems like that could be you could do it in so many different ways, especially with AI now. I mean,
Yes.
when it comes to something like the position of an expert, a captain on a ship, or how a combustion engine works. I mean, like, how do you have the same process no matter what, or is it different every time for each different topic?
It could be different every time. I mean, you could go to everything from studying Wikipedia to researching it online, breaking it down to the actual gaskets. Like in the book, there's one section there how the engine broke down, and I had to research. Okay, not just how does an engine work, but what are some of the things that could cause a boat engine to go bad? How could it be sabotaged and make it look not like sabotage? And those are things that you could research all that. You could also, and just sometimes I would order books. I think for Mystery of Lake Canoe, for example, I think I went and read 8 full books to have a really good grasp. Everything from how the Coast Guard works, which only takes place in like 2 of the chapters. I don't know how many chapters are on the route, 38 chapters or 40 chapters. So only 2 of the chapters do I talk about the Coast Guard. But I wanted to make it as authentic and knowledgeable as possible. How do they talk? How do they deal with an abandoned ship? And how do they go out and do research? How do they interact with local police officers? Those type of things. So yeah, it could be a number of things. And the trick is not just how does it work, but how can a murder happen? How is a murder dealt with? How can a cover-up occur? And you'd be amazed at how many things there are in real life. Some people have, I get quotes and I get comments on Amazon purchases of books, right? People will do reviews.
Sure.
And I've gotten everything from, this is the most awesome book in the world to like, my 10-year-old could write something better than this.
Right.
Well, that was true with one of my fun book, Emma's for Dog Show. I wrote it was a murder mystery, but it was based upon puns and dogs, and it was really goofy, and I had a lot of fun with that. But some people would just say, this is boring, this is unrealistic, this is so contrived, and you'd be amazed a lot of things we think are contrived that can be pulled off of headlines of today's pages, because people think of the craziest ways to try to commit murder and try to get away with it. And a lot of the trick is, speaking of the digital world, is sometimes the digital world works in your favor, because then you can go out and say, okay, what's happened in real life that I can bend a little bit, but that I could write a story about, a murder mystery, where the motive may or may not be known, but the trick is who done it kind of thing, and kind of throw off the audience, use red herrings, etc., those type of things. And that's a fun thing to do. The old saying, art reflects life, reflects art.
Right.
And that's very true in some of my writings.
Well, that's actually one of the things I wanted to ask you about is, as you're writing, do you always have it figured out from the beginning, or is it something that as you develop the story, you like start taking your own twists and turns, and it takes you somewhere you maybe didn't expect? That's
a really good question. And I would say that 80 to 90% of the time, I already have the motive worked out. And I say 90% of the time because sometimes it does take that twist or turn. In one of my books, and I'm not gonna say which one it is. I have like 6 or 7 releases so far. But one of the books, it was actually, I'm trying not to give my own spoilers here, but it was actually a twist where there was more than just one motive that occurred in the book, because it ended up being more than one murderer. But that was a change that I had not originally intended. But the story always has, for me, And there's two types of writers, they say. There's the planners and there's the pantsers, is the term that they use. Planners, obvious, right? You lay out your book, you know exactly, kind of a cliff notes. You know exactly which each chapter is going to go. And that's the way most of the time that I write my books. I say most of the time because I want to give myself an out just in case I deviate from some of that sometimes. But a pantser is someone who, they say that it comes from the word pants, is you write off the seat of your pants. So they just say, and they start typing and typing. Hey, that sounds good. I'll add more. No, I think I'll throw this chapter over here, blah, blah, blah. So they're kind of, to sound blunt, they're making up as they're going along.
Right.
But their eventual goal is to get to this point. Every author, in my opinion, should, if they don't, they should already know where the book is headed at the end. They may not do that, but sometimes I think that you're kind of clumsy and then falling into your ending then. You should always at least know, at least for me, maybe I should speak only for myself, maybe that's a safe way to do it. For me, I have to know what the ending is going to be. And sometimes, this is kind of odd, when I wrote this book the first time, the last chapter was one of the first chapters that I wrote. I think it was probably like the third or fourth chapter I wrote.
Wow.
So I had these couple of chapters here at the beginning, and I had the last chapter already written. So I knew where I was going to go and get there. But the question was, and again, I got to avoid spoilers here, who was going to win out in the end? The murderer or the detective, or those people who were trying to capture the murderer? In other words, the antagonist or the protagonist, using readers' terms or writers' terms. And I was debating whether or not the protagonist would actually capture the antagonist, or if the protagonist would still live. So I was debating all those things, and that was the final chapter that I had to get to. So when you read the book, you're kind of wondering what's going to happen finally here in the end, when the two actually meet up. The book actually, as I was saying earlier, I originally wrote it as 132,000 words. I boiled it down to 108,000. When I was bringing it to certain publishers, they said, it's a pretty good story, but we're not interested. You know, and everyone I went to, even when I tried to shrink the book down, they said, we're not really interested. But one of the other questions they kept asking was, is this the only one? Because every publisher wants to know, does it have legs? Is there going to be a series behind it? Are you going to have sequels? So all the best stories nowadays that have become Netflix stories, like Bosch and who's the latest? Reacher, Lee Child's Reacher, and other series like that. The Old Man. They like to see a series. They like to see it have legs because that's way it's more sellable.
Well, I've heard authors talk about dealing with things like writer's block by having a. I've actually heard an author who takes their artists, the people that they have on staff, and say, okay, I'm about to write this book. I would like you to produce the cover for me. And before I begin, what they do is they take a previously written book, take the cover off of that, put the new cover on, and set it in front of them and say, look, I'm already finished. Now it's just a matter of me getting from here to that. And so in their mind, they've already completed this thing. And so the writer's block for this particular author is like, well, it's already done. Like my vision is complete here. It reminds me when you said you wrote the last chapter early. It's almost like a form of that in a way that you're like, okay, now it's just a matter of like completing the circuit, so to speak, or getting from this point to this point. I mean, how do you deal with things like writer's block, or is that a technique that you've ever employed?
Let me answer the first question.
Sure.
Writer's block happens all the time, absolutely. Which is why what I do is kind of a combination of things. I know I'm going to have writer's block. I know I'm going to struggle from here to the end of the story. It's always going to happen to some extent. What I always do is I write out, like I mentioned before, I write out a chapter by chapter summary, like cliff notes for me. It's typically only like a paragraph, maybe about 4 or 5 sentences long. Here's what's going to happen. Here's what's going to happen in this chapter. Here's what's going to happen. And is it going to be character development? Or is it going to be a continuation of the story? Is there going to be action? Is it going to be dialogue? Is it going to be scenery? Is it just going to be a lot of description? Is there going to be what they refer to as, have you heard the expression Chekhov's guns?
No.
Okay. Sometimes you'll throw in a Chekhov's gun. Now, a Chekhov's gun, it comes from an old play, I believe, from the early 1900s. And what happened from what I know from the play, it was written by a Russian guy named Chekhov. And in the play, there's a rifle hanging in the background of one of the rooms, and the thought was, you don't show a gun in a room or in a story unless you plan to use it.
Okay.
And so the term Chekhov's gun refers to throwing something in at the beginning of the story, just as a side that can be used later on in the story.
Okay.
One of the classic examples that I've seen that I always loved. Have you ever seen the movie Aliens with Sigourney Weaver?
Oh, yeah.
In the beginning, near the beginning of the movie, what does she do? She's like helping out in the factory. So she gets in that bodysuit, and then she starts moving things around with it.
Right.
And she uses that at the end of the movie,
right.
that she has control over it. Well, they didn't just whip that out at the end. They showed you in the beginning that she was trained and knew how to use something like that. And then they used that at the end to help her thwart the mother alien creature.
Right.
So that would be referred to as like a Chekhov's gun,
Okay.
is that you're introduced to something that, oh, well, that's really nice. And then you forget about it. And then it pops up, and it's the means of which the protagonist wins beats over the antagonist at the end. And that's the whole thing about putting the gun in the scene, because you hope that they're going to use that. But back to your thing about writer's block. So I lay up everything chapter by chapter by chapter, and I grab that chapter and I start typing. And sometimes, like I said, I'll be midnight. I'll just be typing away, and then I'll wake up the next morning, or 7 o'clock in the morning, or later the next day, 5, 6 o'clock in the afternoon, and I'll read it and I'll say, this is garbage. What did I write here? But then I say, you know what? I can fix it. I can go back there and fix it. At least I got the ball rolling. Every time I do stuff like that, the old saying, it's always easier to edit than it is to write new material.
Definitely.
It's very true.
Yeah.
And that's how I do. I just force myself to write. It could be the worst piece of garbage that you could imagine for writing. And I have done that stuff, and I go back and say, oh, this doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
Right.
And it's not true to the character. Why would this person say something stupid like that? Or how would they know? This is one of the trickiest things, is I'm trying to write, my latest story is a domestic thriller. And it's like, you have certain people they're not geniuses, they're not college students, they don't have a huge vocabulary. So I said, I got to avoid using words like XYZ. They would never use a word like that in this particular situation. So again, writer's block, write whatever I can at the time and go back and clean it up later. I always try to have fresh material, and which is why I actually get more out of reading the news from around even America, or even in other countries, about murder mysteries that occur that are an influence for me. Yeah.
Well, it reminds me, I saw something on the news yesterday, and this is completely apropos of nothing necessarily, but they found a man who had died a couple of months before they found him, and he was in his home in a bathroom, and he had lived with, it was an interesting story, his mother had lived with him, 90-year-old mother, and some family members had called for a welfare check on the mother, because they hadn't heard from her for a while, and these were family members that lived out of the state. And so the authorities, or the people that came and did the welfare check, mother wasn't there. Turns out she'd been moved to a convalescent home a couple months before that. But the son, 70-year-old son, had passed away in there, and his younger brother lived in the house with him.
Oh, wow.
But he had special needs and never went to that part of the house. So it was this really interesting situation. Wow, the guy was dead for, they said, probably a month or more.
Goodness.
And that his body had become mummified. And when I think of mummification, I think of wrapped in something or whatever. But they said that the term mummified referred to his fluids having drained out of his body, and his muscles had become hard.
Wow.
And I thought, well, what a bizarre environment that must have been for the last month. I just think of like the late afternoon sun coming in the window, and it just being still, and just the thought of him being in there dead with the other person in the house, not even knowing the
situation.
Like, that's the kind of stuff I'm sure you see on the news. It's just like, whoa, okay, that's bizarre and interesting, and how can I use that in a...
Exactly, that's kind of where my mind might go, is thinking, how can I turn that into a murder mystery?
Right.
Because and the only way it would be, sometimes that could be a murder mystery without the actual murder itself. It's like, did a murder actually really occur? One of the things, if you've ever watched the original CSI program that was out with Gil Grissom, and just an awesome program. I loved watching that. But I think in their first or their second season, they had an episode called Chaos Theory. And so they spend this whole hour trying to figure out how this person was murdered, only to find it was a series of accidents, that the person was never murdered. They accidentally had gotten hit, fallen down, I think it was through a laundry chute, got dumped into a trash can, and et cetera, et cetera. And the body was finally found, and it was totally a series of accidents. And maybe one of these days I'll write a book like that. You know, it's like they go through this whole process when it would be written, to me, it would be written something like Michael Connelly's The Lincoln Lawyer, you know, where someone is convicted of a murder and they find out that no murder was actually committed. The person died of natural causes. That would be kind of fun to write.
Yeah,
that would be a twist. And I always like writing books that have a twist in the end, and that's what really grabs a reader at the end. Because if the reader can figure out how and why and what, etc., it takes away kind of the thrill of the writing, in my opinion.
Right.
But you're absolutely right. That's kind of the mummification story.
Yeah.
That is really odd.
Interesting.
Yeah.
You know, one thing that I noticed, I don't read a lot. I used to read a lot more, especially when I was in high school and early college.
We all had free time then.
Yeah.
We didn't think we had free time,
exactly.
But we had way more free time than we realized.
Well, it's weird because looking back at, we talked a little bit about the digital world and how, you know, especially our phones are such an easy distraction.
Yeah.
So when I would plan to do this interview and I received your book, I thought, you know what, I got to do some reading because I want to make sure I have some kind of knowledge. And so I started reading a few days ago, and in so doing, I started to realize something is happening within me when I read, and I think it has to do with I'm a radio guy, and the theater of the mind whole concept of radio drama really intrigues me. There's something, I'd say a level further removed or a level higher, more cerebral something, so we have to make everything up when we're reading, and I think something is happening in my brain. I'm sure I'm not alone. But specifically when it comes to visualizing the imagery in your books, I like to read slowly so I can visualize that sort of thing. And when it comes to a well-written book, it makes it somewhat easy. I mean, that's the beauty of it. So maybe you can speak to something about, as a reader, what do you think is, what is drawing us to read, and what can we do to get back to that on some level as people who, you know, want to especially inspire younger people to get into some reading? Yeah,
it's hard to, there's kind of different levels to answer that question, especially when you start talking about younger readers. I think always younger readers have had a hard time getting into books. You know, if you think about it, back in my days, it's like, oh, okay, well, we'll start playing Atari. You know, it's like everybody's getting distracted by video games. And that was a big thing. You know, oh, that's poison of the mind. Parents said, oh, you need to get back, go out and play outside. Here's a baseball. What do I do with it? And then, but that was video games, and then it was the internet in the 1990s, and then the 21st century. And so a lot of kids had been pulled farther and farther away from actual, you know, taking a physical copy of the book. But thank God you had Kindle and whatnot that made everything. So now you can read a lot of books digitally, and that's amazing. How do I draw that younger generation in? It's very difficult to say because a lot of people now can just resort to going to Netflix and then watching those shows. But Netflix has been an outlet for a lot of authors to become well known. And then people will say, hey, I want to know more about what this, I want to know what, I'm trying to think, Harlan Coben, you know, he's kind of a big name author now, or Michael Connelly, who does the Lincoln Lawyer series and the Bosch series, and he's got some new stuff coming out. And I really enjoy watching his stuff. And then I kind of, you know what? I think I'm going to go read some of his books. And I think that helps the authors who have been around for decades. These people have been around for, 25, 35, 40 years, some of them. The James Pattersons and whatnot, who are very, very famous. I'm not sure I'm fully answering your question about that.
I mean, I think that's interesting. I start thinking about music family trees when you start talking about influences like that. I've never really thought about that from a writing perspective. I think of, I like this musician, who influenced them, and walking backwards in time to see, who influenced the people that influenced them. I think that's an interesting way to view it. I'd never really thought about people taking that next step and looking at, okay, who is the writer of this movie, TV show, or whatever. So that's interesting. I mean, I wonder is there a way to facilitate that for people who are interested in trying writing, like young people who are thinking, like, because you have there's a young lady, and I wish I had thought about this, and I'm going to think about her name after her. She won like an award, and she won like a very famous book, a young Asian woman, and I'm blanking out. She wrote
the trick was what made her really successful. Not only was it just a good story per se, but it was written for her genre. It was something that attracted, like J.K. Rowling and Harry Potter kind of thing. It grabbed an audience that hadn't had it before. A younger generation was drawn in. The same thing with, what's her name? Is it Candace, the Mockingbird, or the... my daughter really enjoyed that. Jennifer Lawrence was the main actress.
Hunger Games.
The Hunger Games.
Yeah.
Suspenseful. That kind of material, that kind of, I think dystopia is kind of a big thing among young people nowadays. I hope it is not a projection of the way they feel the world is going.
Right.
But dystopia, Player Number One, those kind of movies and TV shows that really attract those. Those kind of stories are what really draw the readers in. You have to put your finger on what are kids interested in. I think that a lot of youth are being captured, and I don't mean that in a negative way,
right.
but they're being drawn into reading by like manga comic books,
right.
and they call them graphic novels, and that's drawing a lot of young people in, and not just the pictures, but then they'll want to read about the books. So knowing I don't write that type of material yet, who knows, one day I might, right. But you have to, once you find your genre and you pick something, sometimes it's fresh, it's new. Harry Potter was fresh and new when it came out. It's like, whoa, no one had ever written anything like this back, whatever that started with 25 years ago. But even putting your finger on the pulse of the people, the Jennifer Lawrence again. What was that?
Hunger Games?
The Hunger Games.
Yeah, right.
That was, my daughter loved those type of stuff 10 years ago when it came out.
Yeah.
So whenever you get something fresh and new and it grabs it, and like you said, it's kind of like you just came off the top of your head. You just think about it. That's what really draws readers in, and I think that's kind of fun. The same thing is true in music, I believe, too, as well. A new artist comes out with something brand new. Polyphia, I believe, is the band. They do what's called math rock, and it's just the guy who plays it. He's a fantastic guitar player, just amazing sound. Jumps from jazz to heavy metal, etc., all within the same song. It's the name of the band. I think it's called Polyphia, and other bands like this. Greta Von Fleet. Yeah, they're kind of a Led Zeppelin takeoff.
Totally. Yeah.
But you know what? No one's heard anything from Led Zeppelin in like 30 years, and they hear this, and it's just starting to draw people in. So the same thing happens true in music, where you have these waves of music, new music that comes in, a new sound. Boston from the 70s. No one had ever heard guitar, MIT guitar playing like that or sound effects like that before. And I think kids are always looking for something fresh and new.
One of the authors that I used to love to read when I was younger was Tom Robbins. Did you ever read any Tom Robbins?
The name sounds familiar. What did he?
He was. My favorite book was called Jitterbug Perfume.
Okay.
He had several skinny legs and all, half asleep in frog pajamas. Okay. He was a very quirky author from Seattle.
What was his genre?
It was, boy, that's a good question. It was, I would describe it in the realistic. Sci-fi is a weird word to use because it brings up images of science, of space and like the future.
Aliens, ships flying above,
The book Jitterbug Perfume was so interesting to me because he was bouncing between New Orleans, Paris, and I think Seattle. And it was this story of these people who you would never think had anything to do with one another. And I think it was actually a different time period or something.
Okay.
But one of the guy's main goals was to try to live forever. And so he was doing hot baths, cold baths to try to bring his temperature down so he would be maintained as though he were, living in a refrigerator. It was a weird, so in that sense, it was
pre-cryogenic kind of thing.
Yeah, it was like science fiction-ish in a way, but it also had a lot to do with perfume. Was the title of the book was Jitterbug Perfume.
Yeah.
I need to go back and reread that. It's such an interesting book. But
Tom Robbins?
Yeah, Tom Robbins.
Okay.
But I think the reason I really liked reading his material, and it's funny because there's a passage in the beginning of your book that I'd like to read a short paragraph because it reminds me of his writing in a way.
Okay.
And one of the things that I really liked about his writing was the imagery that it brought up, and it was so easy for me to bring about in my mind. Whatever it was, and you've definitely got some of that going on here. I'd like to just read a short passage. And
I'm not going to stop you from reading my book.
Please. All right. So this is the actually, wow, this is only in chapter 1. I guess the previous part that I read was
the prologue.
Oh, the prologue is this? Okay.
Which is when they actually find the yacht deserted. Yes.
And by the way, I do appreciate the day and the time noting, because it's easy for me to think, okay, now I'm in the future, I'm in the past, and sometimes when I watch a TV show, I'm so easily confused. Like, where are we now, or when are we now?
Yeah, and I could talk to you about that a lot later, but go ahead and read your book. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So here's some of the imagery that I thought was really interesting and easy to conjure up in my mind. At precisely 9 a.m., a large white limo glided into the dock's parking lot. An impeccably dressed driver got out, opened the back passenger side door, and waited. Eventually, a tall, slim man gracefully slid out, white walking cane, then one long leg protruding at a time. He wore a cream white suit, white dress shoes, yellow ascot with black polka dots, and matching white fedora. Just that alone. I mean, I'm just sitting there. I think I actually stopped reading there for a moment. I just wanted to sit there and imagine this dude. And the next part of it really helped fill in the picture for me. But I was just really enjoying the bright yellow ascot and thinking about, okay, black polka dots, huh? And that brought up some interesting imagery.
Right.
Appearing to be in his early 70s, with a pencil-thin mustache, he was still talking on his mobile phone. Once he hung up, he stood and stretched, adjusted his ascot, sprayed his mouth freshener, and cleared his throat as if he were about to give a soliloquy. Just, I mean, that to me, I mean, just, there's no questioning in my mind exactly what I'm seeing. It's just so clear. I'm thinking of it like a Ricardo Montalban kind of figure.
That's a good guy, yeah.
Very distinguished.
Welcome to Fantasy Island.
Exactly, yeah.
Kind of thing, yeah.
Okay, he pulled a pair of sunglasses from his breast pocket, placed them over the long bridge of his nose, and scanned the port. Then, to complete the performance, with a deep breath and a patting of his chest, he took in both the view and the sea air. That reminds me of Tom Robbins' writing, in that it's just so clear and easy for me to picture. I mean, do you have that imagery in your mind as you're writing that?
I do. I had you referred to Ricardo Montalban. I pictured David Niven, that kind of actor. He played in the original Pink Panthers.
Oh yeah.
Did he play the Admiral in Star Wars? I'm trying to remember. But the tall, thin, pencil mustache kind of guy. But the key word there is performance. It was all a show. And what you're learning here is each one of the characters, or each one of the invited guests on the boat, or the yacht in this case, puts on a different show, has a different kind of persona, and I'm trying to convey that as you're going through.
Well, let's shift a little bit and talk a little bit about Castro Valley.
Okay, fantastic.
You've been here. How long have you lived in Castro Valley?
I have lived off and on. In my life, I grew up in Pennsylvania, so a little dinky place called Erie, over by this lake called Lake Erie. It's a small little lake. You wouldn't notice it on a map.
Heard about that one?
Yeah, it's something called Five Great Lakes. It's one of them. But that's where I grew up as a kid, and I came out here to California when I was young in the 70s. And I grew up in Hayward for most of my time, and then jumped back and forth between Castro Valley and San Leandro. And now I've planted myself in Castro Valley for the last 27 years. I'm trying to think, how old is my daughter? She was born, and then we moved 6 months later. We came out here. We lived in San Lorenzo. It's really funny because you have all these little dinky areas, and I tell people, I went to Cal State Hayward. And they go, you mean Cal State East Bay? I said, oh yeah, that's right. And I think, why did they change the name? It's like, okay, Hayward, that sounds like that's one of those podunk little cities that nobody's ever heard of. So they made it East Bay, so it covers all these little podunk cities we have. But Castro Valley is not, in my opinion, it's not a podunk. Castro Valley is an awesome city that I grew up in for the last, like I said, 27 years. There's a lot of beautiful stuff that's been here, seen things come and go. But to me, I've worked in the IT world, and I don't want to go into details necessarily about my job, but I've been a computer programmer, a business analyst, software analyst, et cetera, designer, database, et cetera. And that's kind of the background I have for a lot of the complexity that I write in my book. Some people get upset because my books are complex, and it's like, okay, now I need to dial it down, et cetera. But the thing that I love a lot about Castro Valley, if you think about it, it's central in the East Bay because you've got all the Silicon Valley that surrounds it. So a lot of my jobs, I did a lot of employee/contracting work, dealing with a lot of different companies. I'm not going to give any particular plugs for anyone, but if I mention some, people go, oh yeah, that's a real famous company. But it made it very easy to get around. Whether you drive down to taking BART or the bus into San Francisco, or driving down to San Jose or Mountain View or Lafayette, Oakland. I was, Livermore, San Ramon. I was all over the place for the last 20 plus years. And not only is it beautiful to live here, because I'm up in the hills, so you've got a great view of the San Francisco Bay, and you've got a lot of that bay weather coming in.
Oh, yeah.
So every time I drive out to the Tri-Valley area, aka Pleasanton and San Ramon and Dublin, it's like, wow, it's gotten hotter. It gets 5 to 10 degrees hotter.
Yeah.
And then you get to go out to Livermore, and then you got wine country, which is also a nice, you live in beautiful Castro Valley, and you're just 20 minutes away from wine country if you're a wine drinker, which I really enjoy good wines. I don't have to drive out to Napa, for an hour and a half drive all the time anymore. So those are some of my positive reflections in Castro Valley.
Great. Yeah. Is there anything that you do that you like to do outside? Like you ever go to Lake Chabot or?
I have. Yeah, I've been to Lake Chabot many times. Walks out there. I think I might want to get back into bike riding one of these days. Or my wife thinks I'm probably going to break my neck. I want to pick up roller skating. People say, roller skating? Who does that? But with all the activity that I do, people say, you're just nonstop everywhere you go. But you have to stay physically active the older you get, because we have a tendency to slow down. Yeah. And but for me, keeping not only my mind going, which is what I do with writing, and a lot of people would say, gosh, how so a lot of authors like to start within their 20s. Like I was mentioning this young lady earlier before, who she wrote her first novel and won an award. She was like 19 years old. My gosh, I wish I had started when I was that young. But I started writing when I was in my 50s, and but you can still do it. Keeping that body and that mind active. Lake Chabot is great. I'm trying to think. I walk my dog all the time up and down through back where we live up in the hills here, in the Palomares Hills and the Five Canyons area. Just watch out for the coyotes. Yep. And don't get too close to the cows that are up there, because especially if they have a baby cow. But it's just beautiful, because Castro Valley, 25, 30 years ago was a lot of horse territory, a lot of horses and ranches, and people used to ride. My wife tells me stories of how I think it was her mother, and she used to come up here and ride horses. And now it's all been cleared, and they've put in a lot of a couple thousands of houses up there. Yeah. Not that it's bad per se, but she just kind of misses that. We used to have on Castro Valley Boulevard, they used to have like Western wear places, and you used to go in there and buy a saddle or something like that. Like, saddles, who does that? But yeah, it's Castro Valley is very much a community where people come. It's still very homey, I think, in a lot of ways. Yeah. And people feel really comfortable here. It's just very enjoyable to go on the streets, go shopping. We were talking earlier about the Slice House. And and I'm not trying to give a plug, even though it's one of the best pizzas around, but just a lot of the Castro Valley shops that we have along here, it's great to go shopping. And I wish that more people would come out here and enjoy a lot of Castro Valley. We have our, my favorite thing to do, I'm going to put a plug in for this, although you're going to have to wait till next August, is the car show that they have going up and down the strip every year. I bring my Mustang, I put down the top, and I ride it with, bring family that gets to sit in the back, and we enjoy it. And everybody brings out their cars.
The cruise night?
The cruise night, yes. I think it's the last Saturday night in August every year. It's a blast. Yeah. And it's very, very home style feeling, and then you could eat at Boulevard Burgers, which is awesome. I think people have that sense of, they just feel comfortable and safe here. It's a very family-oriented city. I've really, really enjoyed living here. And I don't think in all the Bay Area, I think it's the best place to live. Yeah. Not too hot, not too cold, friendly, safe. It's just, and not too metropolis. Right. Not too busy yet.
Still got that small town feel.
Yes, very much so.
Any advice that you could give to people, like young people that want to get in? They don't, like, I think I'd like to try that, but it seems like such a daunting task if I've never done it before. I mean, what would you give as far as advice for a young person that might want to try writing? Yep,
that's a good question, and I got a really good answer. Now, the question is, First off, I'm going to answer your question with a question.
Okay.
And it's a rhetorical question. I'll answer it myself.
Okay.
So what do you mean by young person? So a young person could be anywhere between, in their, going through puberty, but it could be 10 to 13-year-olds, 15-year-olds, 20-year-olds, 30-years. Those are all young to you and me.
Yeah.
That's young. You're 30 years old. Oh, wow, you're so old.
Yeah.
But no, you're still young. Currently, right now, I've actually started working with a young man who is the son of a good friend of mine. He wants to get into writing. His genre is more sci-fi, with a twist in it, and it's some very interesting stuff that he's writing, some fun stuff, and I'm really trying to encourage him in that. I also have a family member, I think 15, or he turned just 16, I can't remember, and he wants to get into writing too. I would say find a good mentor, someone who has done a lot of writing. It doesn't have to be a professional writer per se, but see if you can find someone who is a good author and who is open to new ideas. I think what's fantastic, like I mentioned this young lady again, is she brought up something brand new, something that no one had ever thought of. If you have a fresh new idea, go for it. Start writing it. You don't have to be polished. I didn't. I wrote 132,000 words and probably bored readers but by the time they got through the first 3 or 4 chapters in some cases because it was just too long. That's okay. Write it out because you can always. I edited my book 8 times over a course of a year and a half. 8 times. By the time I was finished with this book, I was sick of it. I tell you, people. You read the story passage. I love that passage. But if someone said, "Oh, you want to read the book again?" Like, no, I'm tired of this book. But young people. If you're good at writing, and even if you're not good at writing, you can always find good editors who will help you. And I've done a lot of editing. Sometimes I feel I've done more editing for my college days and afterwards. I write documentation for my work. So I get a lot of writing in it that I have to accomplish. But find someone who can edit your material. Be open to direction. Be open to someone saying, hey, not just, hey, I think we can make this story better. Sometimes you have to ask yourself the question, is it marketable? I go back to my original question, my original statement. Hey, I got a great story, but who wants to read it? Right. So if it's fresh and new material, grab a reader's attention. Even if you're not that great a writer, find someone who does write great. But if you're creative, that's the first way to start. Same thing happens true with musicians. You may not be the best musician in the world. You're not going to be the Steve Vai or the Joe Satriani of guitar playing, or the I was going to say Liberace, but I'm going to lose my audience if I did. Who is the latest and greatest? Whoever the latest and greatest piano players, Billy Joel or whoever.
John Legend,
yeah, some legendary pianist. I don't want to age myself too badly. Lady Gaga, okay, it's not my necessary genre of music, but she's an excellent singer. She's an excellent pianist. I've seen her play. Right. Even if you're not the greatest pianist in the world, but just start composing your songs. Start writing your books. Don't ever let anybody tell you can't write a story. I mean, unless you're really, really bad. But for the most part, if you feel you have something creative, something fun, something that's new and fresh, put it down. Go to my webpage, dangrylles.com. Send me a copy of your manuscript. You can mail it to my P.O. box. I'll look for it if there's anybody aspiring out there. And again, speaking of time, try to write the book as quickly as possible is my advice. Okay. Don't dilly-dally. Like I said, I have people who start the book and then a year later they haven't gotten past the first couple of chapters. Right. If you're going to be a writer, you have to commit yourself to writing. You have to do it. And sometimes that means cutting out, and for young people especially, your social life will suffer, quote unquote, with no free time left. But you don't realize how much free time you actually have when you're young. I say, right, try to devote maybe 1 hour a day or 30 minutes a day to write something and go back and edit it if you have to. Would be my advice. And don't give up. Just keep plugging away at it.
So if people wanted to learn more about you and get a hold of your books, do you have a website that people can go to?
I do. Let's see. I have a sheet here. But you can actually go to my name, Dan Grylles, DANGRYLLES. Okay. There we go. Make sure I spell it right.
There you go.
DanGrylles.com. That's my basic website, and from there you can get free material. I have some free short stories, and some other free material. And then you can also do a search on Amazon or Google it on Goodreads. But buying the material, on my website, there's actually some free short stories that I put out that actually won some awards. That's kind of how I started out.
Nice.
And again, speaking about young readers, if you want a real challenge, first write a short story. This is what I did. And that could be anywhere from 100 words to 5,000 to 20,000 words, depending upon the contest's rules and regulations. Some will be 1,000 words. And submit those and see if you get feedback. You can actually request, if you pay a few dollars more, you can get feedback from the contest themselves. But that not only does that you necessarily hear back from other people how good you are, but you're actually putting yourself on the line.
Right.
Are you willing to write something and accept criticism from the outside world on it? Yeah, my story's a great story, but who's going to read it? If somebody comes back to you and says, someone you don't know, and I've had people in the UK and Australia, they'll read my books.
Oh, wow.
And they'll put, oh, this is the best story, blah, blah, blah. I was like, oh, okay, great. I don't know who you are, and you're from another country. I'm glad you liked it. But putting that, a lot of these contests are in America or Europe, in most places, short story writing contests. Put yourself out there and be challenged. You go onto my website, you'll find that I have one of my short stories was written out there, got honorable mention there. It's on the page. Click on that. You can become a member, get emails, etc., new releases, free stuff that I put out. Plus, there's links to the Amazon books themselves that you can buy. KDP, digital or hard copy for old folks like myself. I love flipping pages. I like reading the stuff. Digital, sometimes it hurts my eyes. Like I said, I work on computers all the time, so I just get tired of staring at a screen all day long. But yes, please go check out the website, and if you love reading. And then you can join the Facebook page as well. I think the link to the Facebook page is also on the web page. You can go out there, or you can just do a search for Dan Grylles. The name is unique. Don't confuse him with the guy named Bear Grylls. He doesn't have the E in his name, so it's just Grylls.
Gotcha.
So please look me up, and I love to correspond with people. You write me questions. Like I said, if you are an author or an aspiring author, I'd love to read other people's stuff. I've done it before with other people in groups that I've been before. It may not be my genre. I read historical fiction. I've read romance before. I've read sci-fi and all kinds of stuff. But I love to read it. I'd love to encourage people to write and be the best author that they can be.
Well, hey, Dan, thank you so much for coming in today.
Hey,
it's been
appreciate it.
Yeah, definitely. I like getting back into reading. It's fun, and to actually sit down with you, the author, and learn more about the writing process.
Great. And one last thing is I had a copy of this book. I don't know, I want to hold it up here. This is The Blackout of Marcus Moore. It's different than my regular murder mysteries. It's a psychological thriller. As you can tell, there's a little bit of blood that's involved here. And it's a fantastic book. It's a fun book. I actually started writing the book as part of a contest, but I didn't do it in time. I didn't finish it in time. I still had like probably about 10 more chapters to write with it. But I released this what year did I do? Was it 2022? 2023. Came out in 2023.
Cool.
I'd like to have a copy of that.
I appreciate that.
The other one there. Yeah, you'll have fun with this. It's totally different than anything else. Psychological thrillers they're kind of like a subgenre of murder mysteries, and it boils down to one question kind of most of the time. In this case, the question is, did he do it?
Okay.
And so that's where it's a lot of fun.
Well, I'm gonna have to get through this one first.
There you go.
Read that
a lot of reading.
Really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your time.
Looking to unlock your child's creativity? Or maybe you're an adult wanting to rekindle a love for music. At Castro Valley School of Music, we've got you covered. Studies show that learning an instrument boosts brain power, improves memory, and strengthens problem-solving skills. But the real magic happens when you play together. At Castro Valley School of Music, we offer lessons for all ages and skill levels, whether it's guitar, piano, violin, or something a little different. Our talented instructors will help you grow and have fun while doing it. And our group classes and ensembles, they teach teamwork, build friendships, and give students the joy of playing alongside others. It's where music becomes more than just notes. It becomes connection. Are you ready to start your musical journey? Call Castro Valley School of Music today at 510-397-0721 or visit us at cvsom.com. That number again is 510-397-0721. or you can visit us at cvsom.com. Let's make music together.
Now back to more of the Castro Valley Compass. Brought to you by the Castro Valley School of Music.
Okay, welcome back to the Castro Valley Compass. I'm your host, Shane Sharkey, and it's volunteer time. Now, normally we talk about some things that are happening locally that are coming up pretty soon, but this time we're going to be forecasting to the end of April to Earth Day. CV San Earth Day Cleanup is going to be April 26th from 9 a.m. to noon, and it's sponsored by CV San. Castro Valley Sanitary District, in partnership with local organizations and groups like East Bay Regional Park District, Friends of San Lorenzo Creek, Hayward Area Recreation and Park District, and Supervisor Nate Miley's office are coordinating the Earth Day Cleanup. Again, that's going to be April 26th from 9 until noon. Where will that be, I wonder? Let's see. Sign up to volunteer and help with litter pickup, gardening, and tree planting and beautification around Castro Valley. For more information, you can visit cvsan.org/ed. Again, that's cvsan.org/ed. And normally we also give you the info about Forester, Jan Hardessy's organization that helps plant trees and glean fruit and I forget what the other one is. Clean up trash, of course. But they are taking the weekend off because there's some rain scheduled. And so if you're interested in helping out Forester.org, I would definitely have you go check out their webpage, their Facebook page, Forester.org. That's FORESTR.org. There's no E at the end like normal. So Forester.org, that's FORESTR.org. All right, that's going to do it for the Castro Valley Compass this week. We hope you've enjoyed the show, and if you'd like to get more information about upcoming guests or give us some suggestions on what you'd like to see us cover, please send us an email at info@castrovalleycompass.com. That's info@castrovalleycompass.com. Until next week, we'll see you around. Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us this week on the Castro Valley Compass, navigating your week through Castro Valley. Do you have an idea for the show, or would you like to get involved? We'd love to hear from you. You can send us an email at info@castrovalleycompass.com. That's info@castrovalleycompass.com. See you next time on the Castro Valley Compass, brought to you by the Castro Valley School of Music.